Nevertheless, I will briefly go through what we have learned in the last class. That is, in the last class we were discussing about the different sources of international law, and while discussing it, we divided the sources of international law into two, that is traditional sources and modern sources. രണ്ടായിട്ട് divide ചെയ്തു. Please keep in mind, only for academic purpose, we are dividing the sources of international law into traditional and modern sources of international law. Okay. Practical sense, there is no such division. Only for the understanding of the student, only for academic analysis, this division is made. So in the conventional sources of international law, we have looked into international custom as a source of international law, and general principles of international law followed by civilized nations. ഈ രണ്ട് സോഴ്സസിനെയാണ് which we try to study under the bracket traditional sources of international law. So before that, everyone, ഞാൻ ക്ലാസ് സ്റ്റാർട്ട് ചെയ്യുന്നതിന് മുമ്പ് very briefly I would like to mention, നമ്മൾ ഓരോ ക്ലാസ്സുകൾക്ക് ശേഷവും ഒരു ഫീഡ്ബാക്ക് ഫോം എല്ലാ കുട്ടികളുമായിട്ട് എല്ലാ സ്റ്റുഡൻസുമായിട്ട് നമ്മൾ ഷെയർ ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ട്. The participants who are part of the GetNet TDP program. അപ്പൊ ഈ ഫീഡ്ബാക്ക് ഫോം ദയവായി എല്ലാ ക്ലാസ്സുകൾ കഴിഞ്ഞതിന് ശേഷം നിങ്ങൾ ആ ക്ലാസ് എടുത്ത റീസോഴ്സ് പേഴ്സന്റെ ഓവറോൾ പെർഫോമൻസിനെ കുറിച്ച് ഒരു ഫീഡ്ബാക്ക് തരണം യൂസിങ് ദ ഗൂഗിൾ ഫോം ദാറ്റ് ഇസ് ഷെയർഡ് വിത്ത് യു. ഓക്കെ, സോ കൈൻഡ്ലി കോപ്പറേറ്റ്. നിങ്ങൾ പ്ലീസ് don't think that the feedback that is given by you will be taken negatively. നിങ്ങൾ തരുന്ന ഫീഡ്ബാക്ക്, whether it is positive or negative, as long as it is constructive criticism of the performance of the resource person, it will be taken in a professional manner. Personal എടുക്കത്തില്ല നമ്മൾ ആരും. None of the resource persons will take it personally. So please assist the resource persons to improve their delivery of their lectures. They are trying to help you, and they need your help in improving their presentation. അപ്പോൾ അതിനു വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് ദയവായി നിങ്ങൾ ആ ഫീഡ്ബാക്ക് ഫോമിൽ ചോദിച്ചിരിക്കുന്ന ചോദ്യങ്ങൾക്ക് കറക്റ്റ് ആയിട്ട് ഉത്തരം തരിക. Please use the remark column wisely. Many of you have said that there is no remarks to be made. Some of the students have made that comment, and nothing എന്ന് പറയുന്നതിന് പകരം whether it is negative or positive, you please make a remark. I believe everyone has some point of view that they want to express. Please take an effort. Okay, please help us out to help you. With that said, let me go back to the lecture. Now let me share my slide. 1 minute. Okay? So I believe I have covered customary international law and the general principles of international law. Cover ഇതൊന്നും ഞാൻ വിശ്വസിക്കുന്നു. Can anyone recall whether we have gone through it properly? ആർക്കെങ്കിലും റീകോൾ ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുന്നുണ്ടോ? In the last class we have gone through it, right? Customary source of international law, then we general principles of international law, I think we have gone through. So
yes sir.
Okay then, very briefly I will mention customary international law. Customary international law, I have already mentioned that it has two important elements, and that is state practice and opinio juris. Okay, two important elements should be there. First one is there should be a state practice, and the state practice should be consistent. Okay, consistent ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു state practice ഉണ്ടായിരിക്കണം, and the state practice, along with consistency, it must be believed by the parties involved in such a state practice that it is legally binding, otherwise known as opinio juris. If these two elements are present, we can say there is a customary international law. Okay. Now, with regard to general principles of international law, general principles of international law is used whenever there is a gap. Okay. Whenever there is a gap in international law, as we have learned earlier in our class, there will be situations or circumstances where there will be no legal principles that is available under international law to cover a particular international dispute. Okay. ഒരു particular international dispute cover ചെയ്യാൻ ഒരു legal principle is absent within the customary law as well as in the international conventions. The court will have to depend on certain general principles of civilized nations. Okay, they have to depend on certain general principles of law recognized by civilized nation in order to fill the gaps. There is gaps within international law because international law is still in its nascent stage. It is not fully developed, and while adjudicating on many international dispute with regard to international law, there will be gaps in international law, that international principles which needs to be filled using a very mature legal system, that is the municipal law. Compared to international law, municipal law is very much mature. Okay. So international law sometimes relies upon municipal law to fill the gaps within international law, and for this purpose the general principles of law recognized by civilized nation is used. Okay. And the gaps that is found within international law is it is identified as non-liquid. Okay. It in Latin it is the gap that is found in international law is known as non-liquid, otherwise translated as not clear. Whenever anything is not clear, whenever there is a dispute that has come before a court or a judicial body with regard to international law, and that particular dispute cannot be resolved through existing international customs or international conventions, and the international conventions or international customs are non-liquid or not clear, they can depend on municipal law. Okay. And we have studied in the last class that municipal law, sometimes international law depends on municipal law to fill the gaps, especially with regard to procedural law. Procedural law, the most of the gaps are found in law, evidence, and procedural law. And in order to fill the gaps with regard to procedural law and the law of evidence, the international courts often depend on the principles that are universally found within municipal law. And those principles include estoppel. For example, estoppel, the principle of estoppel, I will not be explaining what is estoppel. You have studied under law of contract. The principle of estoppel was used by the Permanent Court of International Justice in Mauro Matt's Palestine case, as well as the Temple Vihar of Praga Vihar case by the ICJ. Then there is doctrine of proportionality. Excuse me, can you mute everyone? Can you please mute your mic? Okay, thank you so much. So then there is corporate personality that was utilized in Barcelona traction case. Then there is the doctrine of doctrine of liability, liability for fault, that was used in Cherchow factory case. Then the principle of res justae that was used in administrative tribunal case. Then followed by principle of equity. Principle of equity when it comes to distribution of natural resources, that is often used in international law to resolve a dispute with regard to natural resources. And principle of equity that is accepted all around the world in all municipal laws. It is used by ICJ and PCIJ. Examples include the diversion of water from Mews case and the Ran of Kutch arbitration case, North Sea continental shelf case. These are the classical examples of where the International Court of Justice, in order to fill the gaps with regard to distribution of natural resources, used principle of equity that is recognized as a general principle that is recognized by all nations around the world. Then there is the admissibility of indirect or circumstantial evidence. The ICJ held that circumstantial or indirect evidence are admissible before the international courts that is recognized in the Curfew Channel case. So please go through all these judgments, all the facts of these judgments, and be thorough with it. Definitely an MCQ questions will come, and it will ask among which of the following cases the general principle of equity was utilized, or the general principle of circumstantial evidence was utilized, or estoppel was utilized, or res gestae was utilized. So it is very important that you note down these judgments where the ICJ or the PCIJ has utilized principles within municipal law to fill the gaps within international law. Okay. These are the things we have discussed in the last class, and now we are moving on to modern sources of international law. And within the modern source of international law, please keep in mind it is for only academic purpose. We are classifying the sources of international law into modern sources of international law. And please keep in mind what are the different sources of international law that is recognized under Article 38 clause 1 of the ICJ statute. Okay. ICJ statute Article 38 sources of international law, it is already mentioned, and please keep in mind. And first among them is the international treaty. Okay. So in modern sources of international law, international treaty is one of them. Followed by international treaty, there is the judicial decisions and teachings of the most highly qualified publicist to determine rule of law. Okay. To determine rule of law subject to Article 59 of ICJ statute. And the third modern source of international law is soft source of international law. This soft source of international law is not found mentioned in Article 38 of ICJ statute. The modern sources of international law that is recognized by the ICJ statute includes international treaty and the judicial decisions and publications made by academicians or jurists in international law. These are the two modern sources of international law expressly found mentioned in ICJ statute Article 38. Other than that, there is another source of modern source of international law that is not found mentioned in the Article 38 clause 1 of the ICJ statute, that is soft source of international law. I will come to what is the soft source of international law, what is international treaties, judicial decisions and teachings of the most highly qualified publicist. Okay. Now, the first thing that I would like to discuss, the first modern source of international law that I would like to discuss is judicial decisions. Okay. For the convenience of the students as well as for myself, we will take the judicial decisions as sources of international law as the first modern source of international law that we will be discussing, followed by international treaty and soft law or soft sources of international law. Okay. Now, the first modern source of international law that we are going to discuss here today is judicial decisions. Okay, judicial decisions as a source of international law. Now, why I am saying judicial decisions is a source of international law, or judicial decisions coupled with academic literature written by prominent jurists is a modern source of international law. Why I am saying this? Okay, the reason why it is because before that, please keep in mind, you have to remember that judicial decisions can only be applied subject to Article 59 of ICJ statute. Okay, that we have already discussed what is Article 59 of ICJ statute. In the last class, I have already told you that Article 59 prohibits the use of precedent. Okay, under ICJ statute, the ICJ cannot rely upon its precedents. Okay, that is the decision made by ICJ is only binding between parties to that particular dispute. Okay, and that particular decision can only be applied to that particular subject matter between those disputing parties. Okay, a particular decision of the ICJ cannot be applied in any other cases. In other words, precedent is not recognized, rather it is expressly prohibited under the ICJ statute, under Article 59 of ICJ statute. Okay, but you please note the judicial decisions of the ICJ statute are a subordinate source. Okay, it is also mentioned in the Article 38 clause 1. 1 minute, I will show you. So the different sources of international law that we have discussed earlier in our class under Article 38 clause 1 of the ICJ statute. Okay, fine. This one. Okay, the term that is used is the judicial decisions are recognized as a source of law under clause D. Okay, subclause D. Article 38 clause 1 subclause D says that subject to the provisions of Article 59, judicial decisions and teachings of the most highly qualified publicists of the various nations are a subsidiary means of determining rule of law. Okay, only for determining rule of law, not for determining the law itself, not to apply the law, not to make a law itself, but only to discover the existence of rule of law. The ICJ can rely upon its previous judgments only to determine whether a rule of law has been violated or not. Okay, there is a concept known as rule of law, and the ICJ can only depend on its previous judgments in order to identify or discover whether there is a violation of rule of law or not under international law. Okay, ICJ cannot make any new law under international law using its precedents. It cannot legislate, it cannot make a new treaty, but what it can do is it can identify or discover whether there is a violation of rule of law using its previous judgments. Okay, applied to parties outside the case to which the judgment was delivered. Okay, so the only exception to Article 59 of the ICJ statute is that Article 59 says the decision of the court has no binding force except between parties in respect of that particular case. Okay, the exception is the decision of ICJ can be applied to parties outside the dispute to identify or discover whether there is a violation of rule of law, and this can only be used as a subsidiary source of subsidiary source. The term subsidiary is used in the ICJ statute. In what does it mean by subsidiary? By using the term subsidiary, it indicates that when international customs or international treaties or the general principles of international law fails to provide a solution to a particular international dispute, the ICJ can rely upon its previous judgments. Okay. Okay. Or the ICJ can rely upon its previous judgment as a complementary to the sources of law that it has identified in international conventions, international customs, and the general principles of law recognized by civilized nations. ICJ cannot stand on its previous judgments alone. Okay, the previous judgment, either it should complement the existing sources of international law, that is international conventions, international custom, general principles of international law recognized by civilized nations. Okay, so the previous judgments either should complement the other sources of international law, or when the other sources of international law is absent, it is or it is unable to provide a solution, as I have mentioned, that is the doctrine of res. Sorry. Yeah. 1 minute. That is the doctrine of non-liquid. Okay. When international convention, international custom, and general principles of law recognized by civilized nations are not clear with regard to a solution for an international dispute, the ICJ as a subsidiary source, it can depend on its previous judgment to identify or discover whether there is a violation of rule of law. It cannot make a new legislation. It cannot invent or enact any new principle or law under international law. That is what is meant by Article 59. Okay. So ICJ's judgments can be relied upon as a subsidiary source, as a last resort, or as a complementary to existing sources of international law. Okay. I hope that is clear for you. Now, as a subsidiary source to identify violation of rule of law, the previous judgments of ICJ, along with the academic literature written by prominent jurists, can be relied upon. Okay, so in order to appreciate the judicial decisions as a sources of international law, one has to understand what you mean by international courts. Okay, judgments of international, judicial decisions of international courts. That is what is indicated in Article 38, Clause 1, Subclause D of the ICJ statute. So, what do you mean by international courts? Examples of international court includes the International Court of Justice or its predecessor, the Permanent Court of International Justice. The ICJ was established in 1945, and the PCIJ was established in 1922. Okay, so these two institutions are established around the 20th century. Okay, now another example of an international court is regional international courts like the European Court of Human Rights or the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. Also, these regional international courts are also established during the 20th century. Okay, very recent. That is my point. Okay, another one is international courts set up for special purposes. Special purposes like the Criminal Court of International Criminal Court. The International Criminal Court is established under the Rome Statute for prosecuting war crimes, crimes against humanity, that we will be learning in the coming classes under humanitarian law. Then there is also the International Tribunal for Law of the Sea. Okay, International Tribunal for Law of the Sea is established under the United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea, 1982. The International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea is established under the Convention on Law of the Sea to settle disputes with regard to the law of the sea, the United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea. Okay, so these two international courts are examples for international judicial forums established for special purposes. Okay. Now, another example that is not mentioned here is the WTO dispute settlement mechanism. WTO dispute settlement mechanism is another body where disputes with regard to world trade is settled. Then there is also the WIPRO forum, the forum, the arbitration tribunal forum that is established under WIPO, World Intellectual Property Organization. It also has a judicial wing where it strives to settle international disputes with regard to intellectual property rights. Now, another example also includes ad hoc international tribunals or courts. Ad hoc means a temporary court that is established for a specific purpose or a special purpose, for temporarily established to address a special situation. Okay, ad hoc international tribunals or international courts are also there. A classical example is the military tribunal for trial of German major war crimes, war criminals, German major war criminals, that was established after 1945 at the end of Second World War. It is famously known as the Nuremberg trials. Okay, it is a military tribunal that was established to prosecute, conduct the criminal trials of Nazi military officials who conducted crimes against humanity during the Second World War. Then there is also the ad hoc tribunals that was established in Myanmar and Rwanda to persecute war criminals who conducted crimes against humanity during the Myanmar and Rwanda civil war. Okay, these are all examples of ad hoc international tribunals. They also comes under international courts. Okay, and finally there is the International Arbitration Tribunal, like the Permanent Court of Arbitration. Along with the Permanent Court of Arbitration, there is also different types of tribunals that are established under the UN Central Model Law. UN Central Model Law on arbitration. Based on the UN Central Model Law on arbitration, there are different institutional arbitrational tribunals that exist around the world. Most famous is the Singapore Arbitration Tribunal, New York Arbitration Tribunal. All these come under international courts, and their decisions are a subsidiary source of international law for determining the violation of rule of law, possible violation of any rule of law. Okay. So now coming on to examples where these sources of international law is used. Okay, let me go into a few examples. One example that I would like to give you is the reparation for injuries case, where one UN officer, one diplomat belonging to the United Nations was assassinated by a terrorist group on Israeli soil, and United Nations claimed compensation for injuries suffered to its employees during their service in Israel, and here the ICJ applied and recognized. Actually, ICJ recognized the corporate personality of the United Nations as an international organization. It identified that international organizations are also subjects of international law. They have also artificial personality, and through this artificial personality, they can approach the ICJ as subjects of international law to claim compensation for injuries suffered to their employees. Okay, and Israel also had an obligation to protect the employees of the United Nations under the UN Charter. Okay, so here what happened was there was no international convention providing for stating that the employees of an international organization should be compensated. There was no international custom. So, but nevertheless, whether rule of law has been violated or not, that has to be identified. By causing injuries to the employees of the United Nations during their service, during their mandate in Israeli occupied Palestine, while they were injured, and the Israeli government failed to exercise their obligation towards their the employees of the United Nations under the UN Charter, this is a violation of rule of law. And that was recognized as such by the ICJ in the reparation of injuries case. Okay, so ICJ basically by recognizing the UN as a subject of international law, as having legal rights and obligations, it was trying to identify whether there is a rule of law or not. Okay. And that was, and the rule of law was United Nations. It has artificial personality. It has rights and obligations, and its rights have been violated. And it, as a subject of international law, it can approach the International Court of Justice. Also, please remember, while we studied the definition of international law, we have looked into the definition of international law given by J.J. Stock, and then there is also the Fenwick, the definition given by Fenwick. Then in both, both jurists held that international organizations are also subjects of international law. Okay, both Fenwick and J.J. Stock held that international organizations are subject of international law. So in the reparation case, ICJ recognized the juristic work done by on artificial personality or corporate personality of international organization, and the fact that since they have a corporate personality under international law, they are also subjects of international law, as declared by the literature work of J.J. Fenwick and J.J. Stock. Taking into account those academic literature, ICJ identified that there is a violation of rule of law and held that Israel should pay reparations. Okay. On a similar note, in Anglo-Norwegian case, Anglo-Norwegian case is a case between Norway and Germany and England. So in this case, the ICJ, by looking into academic literature on law of the sea, written by Norwegian jurists, different Norwegian jurists, who recognized the existence of a customary practice in their literature work, taking into account those literature work and the customary practice demonstrated by Norway, where Norway tried to draw the baseline. Baseline is the point where baseline is the tip of a territorial land of a nation state that is in contact with the sea. Okay. The points of a territorial territory of a state which is in contact with the sea, high seas, is known as the baseline. Okay. Usually the baseline is like zigzag. It goes like a zigzag. If India territorial waters, India southern South India മൂന്ന് സൈഡും നിങ്ങൾ നോക്കുകയാണെങ്കിൽ it is like it is going like a zigzag. It is not a straight line. Okay. അപ്പം ഈ സൗത്ത് ഇന്ത്യ ആണ് നമ്മുടെ ഇന്ത്യൻ സബ് കോണ്ടിനെന്റിൽ സൗത്ത് ഇന്ത്യയുടെ മൂന്ന് സൈഡിലും കടൽ കൊണ്ട് ചുറ്റിയിരിക്കുകയാണ്. ഓക്കെ. അപ്പൊ ആ സൗത്ത് ഇന്ത്യ നമ്മുടെ കന്യാകുമാരിയുടെ ഏറ്റവും എഡ്ജിലിരിക്കുന്ന ആ അറ്റം എന്ന് പറയുന്നതാണ് കടലിന് മുകളിൽ, അതായത് ലോ ടൈഡിന്റെ സമയത്ത് കടലിന് മുകളിൽ വന്നിരിക്കുന്ന ടെറിട്ടോറിയൽ ലാൻഡ് മാസിന്റെ ഏറ്റവും അറ്റത്തിനാണ് ബേസ് ലൈൻ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. സാധാരണ ഒരു ബേസ് ലൈൻ എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ സിക്സാഗ് ആയിട്ട് പോകും. ഇറ്റ് ഇസ് നോട്ട് എ സ്ട്രെയിറ്റ് ലൈൻ. പക്ഷെ നോർവേയുടെ കാര്യം എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ നോർവേയുടെ നോർമൽ ടെറിട്ടോറിയൽ വാട്ടേഴ്സിന് അപ്പുറം കുറച്ച് റോക്ക് ഫോർമേഷൻ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. There was a rock formation that was beyond the territorial landmass of Norway. What Norway did was Norway drew a straight line between those rock formation, and it basically drew a straight baseline. Okay, and I wish I can draw on a board. ഒരു ബോർഡിൽ വരച്ചാലേ ശരിയാവത്തുള്ളൂ. ബേസിക്കലി നോർവേയുടെ ടെറിട്ടോറിയൽ, നോർവേ എന്ന് പറയുന്ന രാജ്യം അതിന്റെ സൗത്ത് ഈസ്റ്റ് വെസ്റ്റ് റീജിയൻസ് പസഫിക് ഓഷന് ചുറ്റിയിരിക്കുകയാണ്. ഓക്കെ, അപ്പൊ അതിന്റെ 4 ദിക്കും കടലുകൊണ്ട് ചുറ്റിയിരിക്കുകയാണ്. നോർവേയുടെ ജിയോഗ്രാഫിക്കൽ ഏരിയയുടെ ഒരു പ്രത്യേകത എന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ നോർവേയുടെ മെയിൻ ലാൻഡ് മാസിന് അപ്പുറം ഒരു ബേസിക്കലി ഒരു 10-12 നോട്ടിക്കൽ മൈൽസിൽ കുറെ റോക്ക് ഫോർമേഷൻ ഉണ്ട്. നോർവേയുടെ മെയിൻ ടെറിട്ടോറിയൽ ബോഡിക്ക് ചുറ്റുമായിട്ട് ഒരു പേൾ പോലെ, സ്ട്രിങ് ഓഫ് പേൾ പോലെ കുറെ റോക്ക് ഫോർമേഷൻ ഉണ്ട്. ആ റോക്ക് ഫോർമേഷന് വലിയ റോക്ക് ഫോർമേഷൻ അല്ല, കുറെ ഗ്യാപ്പ് ഉള്ള ചെറിയ റോക്ക് ഫോർമേഷൻ. അപ്പം നോർവേ ബേസിക്കലി എന്താ ചെയ്തെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ ഇറ്റ് ഡ്രോ എ സ്ട്രെയിറ്റ് ലൈൻ ബിറ്റ്വീൻ ദ റോക്സ്. ഓക്കെ, basically it extended its territorial waters using those rocks. Usually നമ്മുടെ territorial water is measured from the mainlandന്റെ ഏറ്റവും അറ്റം മെയിൻലാൻഡ്, നമ്മുടെ മെയിൻലാൻഡ് ടെറിട്ടറിയുടെ കടലുമായിട്ട് കോണ്ടാക്ട് ചെയ്യുന്ന ഏറ്റവും അറ്റം, അതിന്റെ അറ്റം എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് ലോ ടൈഡില് കടലിന് മോളിൽ നിൽക്കുന്ന അറ്റത്തിൽ നിന്ന് നമ്മള് 12 നോട്ടിക്കൽ മൈൽസ് വരെ, ഒരു നോട്ടിക്കൽ മൈൽ എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ 1.8 കിലോമീറ്റേഴ്സ് ആണ്, 12 നോട്ടിക്കൽ മൈൽസ് വരെയാണ് ടെറിട്ടോറിയൽ വാട്ടർ. പക്ഷെ നോർവേ ചെയ്തെന്താണെന്ന് വെച്ചാല് അവരുടെ മെയിൻ ലാൻഡ് മാസിൽ നിന്ന് അളക്കുന്നതിന് പകരം അവരുടെ മെയിൻ ലാൻഡ് മാസിന്റെ ചുറ്റിനും കിടക്കുന്ന കല്ലുകളെ വെച്ചുകൊണ്ട് അവർ ടെറിട്ടോറിയൽ വാട്ടർ അളക്കി. അപ്പൊ ബേസിക്കലി അവിടെ എന്താ സംഭവിച്ചെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ they extended their territorial waters beyond what was conventionally acceptable. But then what happened was, even after this particular convention came into force, from the very beginning Norway was considering the rock formation, the point from the rock formation as their territorial water. So ICJ basically tried to identify that there is a rule of law where Norway was persistently objecting to the emergence of a new customary practice. That is, ella rajyangalum, when every country was measuring their territorial waters from the tip of their main landmass to the high sea, Norway was measuring their territorial waters from the rock formation to the high seas. Okay, so basically Norway was persistently objecting to the emergence of a new customary practice, the international customary practice, and this persistent objection made by Norway should be recognized. That was the judgment delivered by ICJ in this Anglo-Norwegian case. Basically ICJ was trying to identify a rule of law that was existing, and this rule of law is the rule of law of persistent objector. Okay, so basically this persistent objector is again and again it was first declared in this particular case. Basically what ICJ has done is it did not invented any new laws, but rather it identified a new local custom, a unique custom that existed particular to a country. Okay, it is discovering, rather than inventing new principles, it is discovering a principle that was invented by Norway as a subject of international law. And this particular objection was accepted by the international community for a majority of time. നോർവേ ഇങ്ങനെ ഒബ്ജക്ട് ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ടിരുന്നത് കുറെ കാലങ്ങളായിട്ട് അത് അക്സെപ്റ്റ് ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ടിരുന്നു. നോർവേയുടെ ഒബ്ജക്ഷൻ എതിരായിട്ട് ഒരാൾ ഇതുവരെ ഒബ്ജക്ട് ചെയ്തിട്ടില്ല. This particular objection was filed only after the United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea in 1956 by UK against Norway. And the court held that since Norway did not accepted the UN Convention on Law of the Sea, and it was practicing this particular act from time immemorial, this should be recognized as a local customary practice. Local customary practice. I have mentioned about local customary practice in our previous class. Okay. So judicial decisions are applicable, and they are applied by ICJ to identify rule of law, and rule of law identify or discover rule of law. Never, ICJ is never inventing any particular law or creating any international law, but rather it is discovering rule of law. Okay. So that is the basic idea. Now, coming back to the next important source of international law, modern source of international law, that is international conventions. Okay, so we have dealt with judicial decisions clubbed with academic literature as a subsidiary source of international law. Please remember the term subsidiary. Okay, so usually what happens is judicial decisions, the utility of acknowledging judicial decisions as sources of international law, or academic literature done by jurists as a source of international law, is that it is through judicial decisions and academic literatures written by jurists we identify customary practices. Okay, I have mentioned earlier that you have to identify two factors that in order to identify a customary international law. One is you have to identify there is a state practice, and then you have to again collect evidences which prove that such state practices are consistent, and this consistent state practice is considered as legally binding opinio juris. Okay, and that is determined, the platform where this is determined is judicial decisions and academic work. Okay, so different jurists in the academic literature, they will try to identify state practices which are considered as legally binding, and whenever a particular dispute arises, the judiciary will also try to, international judicial forums will also try to identify whether the alleged state practice is consistent, whether those alleged state practice is considered as opinio juris. So customary sources of international law, they emerge from judicial decisions and juristic work which tries to identify the rule of law that exists among nation states. And the rule of law are the customary sources of international law. Okay. So the rule of law that is identified in judicial decisions and academic works are the customary sources of international law. Okay, so from where the customary sources of international law is identified, through which mechanism a state practice is discovered which is considered as legally binding. The mechanism is judicial decisions and academic works. Okay, so judicial decisions and academic works are considered as a sources of international law in order to identify emerging or existing international customary law. Okay, so moving on to the next modern source of international law, that is the international conventions or international treaties. Okay, so we are moving on to the second most important modern source of international law. And why I have mentioned the judicial decisions or academic work as sources of international law as modern source. I have mentioned judicial decisions and academic work as modern source of international law because ICJ, PCIJ, or the ICC, or the International Tribunal for Law of the Sea, or the Inter-American Human Rights Court, or the European Court of Human Rights, all of these judicial forums are established either in the 20th century or in the 21st century. Okay. Please note, the PCIJ was established in 1922, ICJ was established in 1945, the European Court of Human Rights is established in 2001, the Inter-American Human Rights Court is established around 1975, The ICC is established in 1991. The International Tribunal for Law of the Sea is established in 1986, I believe. Then there is the ad hoc international tribunals that I have mentioned. That is the Hague, the military tribunal that was established in Germany. That it was established in 1945. The Myanmar and Rwanda Criminal Tribunal was established in 66 and 95 respectively. All of these international courts, all of the tribunals, they all emerged in the 19th century. Okay. The Permanent Court of the Permanent Court of Arbitration, for example, it was established through the Second Hague Conference that was held in 1908. Okay. The oldest international judicial forum is the Permanent Court of Arbitration. The Permanent Court of Arbitration was established in 1908. Okay. So all these international courts or international judicial forums from where the judicial decisions are emerging, they were established either in the 19th century or in the either in the 20th century or in the 21st century. Okay. For this reason only, I have mentioned the judicial decisions as a modern source of international law. Also, it is the same for academic sources of international law. Academic sources of international law started to proliferate only after the 19th century. Okay, academic legal academics on international law was very weak. I have mentioned earlier when we try to analyze the definition of international law. In the prior to the 19th century, international law was not at all considered as a proper law. For example, Thomas Hobbes says that international law is a vanishing point of jurisprudence. John Austin believes that it is a positive morality. Okay. So international law was not at all recognized as a law in the proper sense by legal academicians who existed prior to the 19th century. Only after the 19th century, we started to recognize international law as a proper law. And that was clearly evident in Oppenheimer, from Oppenheimer to J.J. Stock, the different definitions given by jurists we have analyzed. And even the modern definition is inadequate. It is still evolving. And when we analyze the definition of international law, we can see that there is potential for growth. There is a lot of gap. And that is why we have accepted the general principles of civilized nations as a source of international law, along with customary international law that we have discussed in the earlier class. So this is the reason why I have classified judicial decisions and academic work done by prominent legal jurists as a modern source of international law. Okay, I hope that is understood. Now, let me briefly go through the next modern source of international law, that is international treaties or international conventions. Okay, we still have time. We have, I believe, 10 minutes, less than 10 minutes. That will be more than enough. I think we can, so international conventions or international treaties as a modern source of international law. Under Article 38, Clause 1, Clause A, international treaty is considered as a source of international law by ICJ statute. Okay. So what is international treaty? What is the international convention? So international treaty or international convention is basically an agreement that exists between nation states. Okay, basically it is a contractual agreement that exists between nation states, and this contractual nature of international convention is expressly evident when we try to analyze many of the definitions of international law in our previous class. Okay, you see, when please try to remember the definitions of international law that we have discussed in the first class. Okay, many of the definitions were trying to classify international law as agreements among nation states. If you look into the definition of Oppenheimer's new definition and old definition, the definition given by J.G. Fenwick or J.G. Fenwick or Stark, they all try to classify international law as a culmination of agreements between nation states. So basically, the international convention is a basic agreement or a contract between nation states leading to creation of international law. Okay, but whether the same situation exists within municipal law, whether subjects of citizens within a country can create a new law through contracts, whether that is possible. So the creation of international law through contracts among nation states is in complete antithesis to the situation that exists in municipal law. In municipal law, you cannot create a new law through contract between citizens of a state. Okay, the monopoly for creating new law is vested with the legislative organ of the state, and the different executive organs to which the legislative organ has expressly delegated the legislative powers through the parent statute. Okay, so in municipal law, no citizen under ordinary circumstances, no citizen is permitted to create new laws using contract. Whereas in international law, nation states as subjects of international law, they can enter into agreement among themselves, which may lead to a commercial transaction or creation of an international treaty, international law. Okay, if the international treaty or international conventions, the basic principles of international law governing international treaty is codified under two important international conventions. Okay, so there are certain international customary practices which exist which dictates how a treaty should be concluded. What are the basic principles of an international treaty? There are certain international customary principles. Okay, and these principles are codified into two important international treaties. And these two important international treaties are the Vienna Convention on Law of Treaty 1969 and the Vienna Convention on Law of Treaty between states and international organization or between international organizations 1986. So there are two Vienna Convention on Law of Treaties, one in 1969 and the other one is 1986. Okay. Both these treaties try to codify the existing customary practices which dictates or governs the transaction of drafting and concluding international treaty for executing economic transactions or making new international laws. Okay, so basically these two international treaties on law of treaty, they are made for the same purpose between different subjects. Okay, the Vienna Convention on Law of Treaty 1969, for example, the Vienna Convention on Law of Treaty 1969 governs conclusion of treaties between nation states. Okay, treaties can also be entered between international organization and nation states or between international organizations. Okay, who can conclude international treaty? International treaty can be concluded between nation states or between nation states and international organizations or between international organizations. Why? Because international organizations and nation states are subjects of international law that we have studied earlier. Okay, so in order to govern all international treaties entered between nation states, the International Convention on Law of Treaty 1969 is enacted or ratified. Okay, all the principles codified in the VCLT 1969 governs international treaties concluded between nation states. And for international treaties concluded between nation state and international organization or between international organizations, such principles of international customary law is codified under the Vienna Convention on Law of Treaty 1986. Okay. Basically, the basic principles codified in both treaties are same. The only difference is who are the parties to the treaty. Okay, that is the only difference between the two treaties, and all the rest is the same. Okay, now moving on, let us see what are the different types of treaty. There are two types of treaties mainly. One is the lawmaking treaty, and another one is the commercial treaties, okay, or otherwise known as bilateral treaty. Okay, so lawmaking treaties are treaties which makes law, international law. The lawmaking treaties are treaties where the conclusion of which results in the making of a new international law. And examples of such a lawmaking treaty are includes the Articles of Agreement of World Trade Organization, Articles of Agreement of International World Bank or IMF, or you can even take the UN Charter. UN Charter is an international treaty, and the UN Charter, the conclusion of a UN Charter creates international law. Okay, the international treaty constituting the World Intellectual Property Organization, it creates international law with regard to intellectual property rights. The Articles of Agreement on WTO tries to create international law with regard to international trade, or the Convention on Human Rights, for example. There are two conventions. The one is the Convention on Civil and Political Rights and the Convention on Socio-Economic Rights. That two conventions are there. These two conventions or treaties create laws. They create laws, international law. They create international law. So they are lawmaking treaties. Okay. Lawmaking treaties are most often they are multilateral treaties. Okay, multilateral treaties mean there are more than two parties that are involved in the lawmaking treaties. Often, most commonly, all lawmaking treaties are multilateral treaty. Multilateral treaty means there are more than two parties to ratify an international treaty. Then coming to the bilateral treaty or commercial treaties. Okay, these treaties are contractual in nature, purely contractual in nature, and these treaties are concluded between nation states and for commercial purposes, for establishing economic relationship. Okay, usually bilateral treaties or non-lawmaking treaties, they are concluded for establishing economic relationship or political friendship among nation states. For example, there is a treaty that was entered between India and the Soviet Union during the time of Indira Gandhi, I believe around 1960, 65 or 70, I believe. The Treaty of Friendship was concluded between the Soviet Union and India. It was a bilateral treaty or a non-lawmaking treaty, and this treaty was concluded between these two countries in order to ensure cultural and military security. Okay, that was the purpose. And there are also non-lawmaking treaties or bilateral treaties where it is entered for commercial or economic relationship, for establishing economic relationship. For example, Transatlantic Trade Treaty or the Trans-Pacific Trade Treaty, or the free trade agreement between two countries. You see, for example, the ASEAN. ASEAN is the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. It is a result of a multilateral treaty. Now, not all multilateral treaties are lawmaking treaties. You see, some multilateral treaties are established for commercial purposes and or economic purposes. When a multilateral treaty is established for commercial or economic purposes, and this multilateral treaty is long lasting, it becomes a lawmaking treaty. Okay, there are certain exceptions, and the exception among those exceptions include the ASEAN. ASEAN is a multilateral treaty that was established for establishing commercial relationship. And there is also the Treaty of the European Union. A Treaty of the European Union is also a multilateral treaty. It's a regional treaty that was concluded among the European countries. Okay, and it was for economic purpose, purely for monetary and economic purpose. That particular treaty was concluded. And it has sometimes such treaties cannot be classified as a lawmaking treaty or a non-lawmaking treaty. It is confusing. Generally, there are two types of treaties that are lawmaking treaty and non-lawmaking treaties. And the non-lawmaking treaties are either created for establishing economic relationship, whereas the lawmaking treaties are always, without exception, they are bilateral. Multilateral, and they create international law. Okay, so international treaty can be made between states or sometimes between state and international organizations. Please remember, lawmaking treaty, when it comes to lawmaking treaties, it can be concluded between states or international organization or between international organizations. That is provided under Article 1 and 6 of the VCLT 1969 and Article 1 and 2 of VCLT 1986. Please go and look into it. Okay. Then treaties, sometimes called agreements, convention, exchange of notes or protocols. There are multiple terms synonymously used to substitute treaties. Okay. There is a lot of synonymous terms to treaties. Treaties are sometimes called as agreement, conventions, exchanges, notes, or protocols. Okay, please keep that also in mind. So I have also gone into the international convention or treaty or bilateral treaties, multilateral treaty. Then based on the foundation of international treaty is based on two important maxims. Okay, two important principles. The first principle is pacta sunt servanda, and the second principle is pacta tertis nec nocent nec prossent. Okay, these are the two important principles of international law that forms the foundation of international treaty. Okay, or international treaty as a source of international law. So what is pacta sunt servanda? Pacta sunt servanda, that is provided under Article 26 of VCLT. Pacta sunt servanda means an agreement entered into must be followed in good faith or implemented in good faith. Okay, that is what is meant by pacta sunt servanda, and that is expressly acknowledged in Article 26 of VCLT 1969. And what is pacta tertis nec nocent nec prossent? A party who is not a state which is not a party to an international treaty is not bound by that international treaty. Okay, a state which is not party to the treaty is not bound by the principles of that treaty. That is pacta tertis nec nocent nec prossent, and that is again recognized under Article 34 of the VCLT 1969. Okay, please note these provisions of VCLT. Please note these maxims. These are the two. These two maxims are the two important maxims that forms the foundation of international conventions or treaties as a source of international law. Okay. Now, here what I have done is I have given you this is a small picture of the preamble of the Charter of the United Nations. Okay, so here it says that we, the people of the United Nations, determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime has brought untold sorrow to mankind. Okay, this is the starting line or the preamble of the UN Charter. Okay, so the UN Charter is authored. The wording that is used in the preamble of the UN Charter indicates that there is an agreement. There is an agreement among the citizens of the world. Okay, all the citizens of all the countries agree among themselves to constitute this United Nations to save succeeding generation from the scourge of war. So there is an agreement. Okay, there is an agreement between parties, and in order to evidence, in order to demonstrate this agreement, I have shown you this clip of the preamble of the United Nations. Okay. Now, Pacta sunt servanda, I have already mentioned Article 26 of the Vienna Convention. That is, every treaty in force is binding upon the parties and it must be performed by them in good faith. That is what is mentioned by Article 26 of the Vienna Convention 1969. Okay. If you look into the UN Charter, Article 2, Clause 2 of the UN Charter, it says that all members, in order to ensure to all of them the rights and benefits resulting from the membership of the United Nations, shall fulfill in good faith. Please note the term that is used in the UN Charter. The term used in the UN Charter is in accordance with Article 26 of the Vienna Convention on Law Treaty. Okay, fulfill in good faith the obligations assumed by them in accordance with the present Charter. Okay, so all the parties who have entered into the UN Charter, who have ratified the UN Charter and became a member of the General Assembly and also the member of the Security Council, they must adhere to the principles codified in the UN Charter in good faith. Pacta sunt servanda. Pacta sunt servanda. That is mentioned under Article 2, Clause 2 of UN Charter. And this the principle of Pacta sunt servanda is again recognized under Article 26 of the Vienna Convention on Law Treaty 1969. The principle of Pacta sunt servanda is a customary international law that is codified into the VCLT 1969. That is the international treaty. Okay, so international treaty or lawmaking treaties basically codify existing international customary practices, or they try to replace existing international customary practices. Okay, and international treaties, since it is written and codified, it gives certainty. Then Pacta tertis nec nocent nec procent. That is Article 34 of VCLT 1969 says that treaty does not create either obligation or right to a third state without consent. Okay, so without consent, a state which is a third state cannot be made cannot be made to bound by an international treaty. Okay. Okay. Then for another important point is for a third state, the treaties has no legal impact because they are a thing made by others. There is also another maxim, Rex inter alios acta. Res inter alios acta. Please note this maxim, res inter alios acta. It means a thing made by others. Okay, so a state which is not a party to an international treaty are not bound by that international treaty because that particular treaty is made by others. Res inter alios acta. So this maxim should be taken into consideration in addition to Pacta tertis nec nocent nec procent. Okay, Article 34. Then this is clearly again another one is, what do you mean by a third state? A third state is clarified under the VCLT 1969 under Article 2 Clause H. 2 clause H says a third state means a state which is not a party to the treaty. Okay. So these are the basic customary rules of international treaty. The first customary rule is pacta sunt servanda. Second, that means a treaty entered between states must be adhered to in good faith, recognized under Article 26 of the Vienna Convention on Law Treaty 1969. Second basic principle of international treaty is pacta tertis nec nocent nec prossent, acknowledged in Article 34 or codified in Article 34 of the VCLT 1969, which says that treaty does not create either obligation or a right for a third state. Who is a third state? The third state is defined as a state which is not party to a treaty, and the definition is given under Article 2, Clause H of the VCLT 1969. Okay. Now, there is also another maxim: res inter alios acta. A treaty that is made by others are not binding on a state. Okay, that is the basic principles. I think I will close this class with these basic principles of international treaty. In the next class, we will discuss what are the exceptions. What are the exceptions to the basic principles of international treaty? Okay. So these are the general principles or basic principles of international treaty or international conventions. It is the foundation, and to these basic principles or general principles of international treaties, there are certain exceptions. Okay, these exceptions I will try to discuss in the next class. Okay, since we have ran out of time. So please note all these provisions that I have mentioned. Please note all the case laws I have mentioned. Try to study these provisions in detail. Okay, that because the questions will be asked in the MCQ in detail, very minutely. So it is very important that you study each and every subject in very much detail, provision by provision, word